Aemeath might become the new best Wuthering Waves unit. Let's talk about it. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. Now I know what you might be thinking. Juice, have you lost your mind? How can we tell that a character is going to be the best in the game from literally just animations and nothing else? Well, obviously, take it with a grain of salt. We don't have any official information on the character beyond the official animation reveal, and we also have her attributes. But the thing is, these animations did somewhat confirm something to me. Before, I was a little bit skeptical on how important she was, because she's coming out so early. I thought to myself, this surely isn't the Sentinel Resonator. I can't really fathom this being a character of that level of importance if she's coming out so early. It just didn't really make sense to me in terms of the story timeline. That was my main confusion. But it seems like that doesn't matter. Yes, she is coming out a lot earlier than I anticipated, considering how she's been teased by Kuro Games and whatnot, but judging by the animations that Kuro Games themselves have shown off, I am led to believe that yes, this is an important character, she is going to be doing some crazy things in the story probably, and yeah, she is very much going to be an important release. I was wondering if she was perhaps a tier below Sentinel Resonator, but no. I am now pretty convinced that this character probably has huge lore implications when it comes to Lahai Roi. Anybody that has done the Lahai Roi story so far knows the Exostrider is kind of a really big deal. So yeah, I'm led to believe that this character is of quite high importance. And there's also the fact that she may or may not be a Nanami XP. I am seriously leaning towards yes, I do think she is, but obviously we don't know that yet. It could very well just be the biggest coincidence of all time, but I don't know about you, but I feel like Kuro Games would not make a character that looks this similar to Nanami without being fully aware of what they're doing. So why does this lead me to believe that Aemeath is going to be the best unit potentially? Especially considering the fact that we have characters like Furlova in the game currently, so saying that a character could potentially become the new best when we have such little official information on them is a very bold statement. Well, I actually have a very simple answer to this. Sentinel Resonator. Now, granted, Aemeath has not been confirmed to be a Sentinel Resonator. We can only really speculate on that based on story theories. However, she is definitely important enough to be considered of that level of importance to Kuro Games, I believe. I do think that even if she's not a Sentinel Resonator directly, because Lahai Roi doesn't have a Sentinel, though we'll have to see how they handle this in story, I do think that at least marketing-wise, they are going to be treating her the same way that they treated Jinshi and Cardathea. Consider when those two units came out. Now, with Jinshi, you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt, because while she was definitively the strongest unit in 1.x in terms of DPS, she was also one of the first characters to come out. Anyone who was around for that knows that the only other two limited 5 stars we had in the game at the time were Jian and Yinlin. Otherwise, it was just the standard characters for 5 stars, and of course, all of the 4 stars in the game at the time. So, with that being said, saying that Jinshi was the strongest in 1.x isn't really saying much when you consider that we didn't really have a big character roster at the time of her release. I would say what matters a little bit more is what happened after the fact. For the full rest of 1.x, Jinshi continued to be the best DPS in the game. We did get some other strong DPSs for sure, like Camellia for instance. However, nobody came to Jinshi's level. She was definitively the best one, and because we didn't have Whimpering Waste at the time, and the only two endgame modes were TOA and holograms didn't reset, so the only resetting endgame was TOA, Jinshi was absolutely perfect. She was an absolute nuclear bomb, and she was fantastic in that mode, completely trivialized it. So she was a very good character. And then when Cardathea came out, now I will say it's a bit of a different case because she's a negative status unit, and this only applied if you managed to get Shakona, but if you did have Shakona and you pulled for Cardathea, she was also the best DPS in the game upon her release. She got tons of attention from Kuro Games, tons of marketing material, and her power level was second to none. She was definitively better than every other team in the game for quite a hot minute, and for the rest of 2.x, she remained as a really strong TOA DPS. She isn't as good in Whimpering Wastes simply because of how her kit works. However, in general, her damage is definitely top-notch, and even to this day, her damage is still really strong. I generally don't advise in investing into Cardathea anymore, simply because it's really awkward to invest into negative status units in my opinion. But if we're just looking at objective terms and raw damage, Cardathea had that in spades upon her release. So if Aemeath is anything like those two units in terms of marketing value and just general importance, something tells me that she is also going to break the game one way or another. Now, like I said, okay, you can take Jinchi's case with a grain of salt, but Cardathea is an excellent example. She released in 2.4, she had gotten a big story patch in 2.2 and continued to be relevant after that point, and also ended up becoming the strongest negative status DPS in the game, which makes sense. She was the Sentinel Resonator of Venecita, so they decided to make her encompass that region-specific gimmick. Now point your attention towards Aemeath. We've seen the animations. We know how crazy she looks. Like, diabolically crazy. So that's one thing. But another thing I'd like to point out is take a look at who released before her. Kuro Games has a very set structure when it comes to banners. Typically speaking, 1 DPS, 1 support. This was consistent for a very, very long time, until 3.0 decided to break that. I'm excluding solo patches, by the way. I am primarily focusing on the typical Wuthering Waves patch. They released 2 supports. Well, Mornier is still yet to release, but she is going to be releasing soon, and we have Linny, a second salt teammate in the game currently, and Mornier, based on the information that we can derive from the healing set in the game that is currently unused, I am led to believe she's a support, and that healing set also mentions off-toon build-up. So if she has anything to do with Toon Break, and Linny does have things to do with Toon Break, they're going to form the Toon Break core. Cardathea completely encompassed the gimmick of her region. Man, I wonder what Aemeath is going to do when we currently don't have any Toon Break DPS, and it is very clear that Kuro is putting a lot of attention onto Aemeath. I wonder. So, I personally think that it is highly likely that she is going to have something to do with Toon Break, and she is likely going to utilize this core better than other characters. Consider that Linny is a ridiculous S-tier character right now. She is genuinely one of the strongest characters in the game, and is stupidly versatile and strong. Her buffs are also excellent, and the moment we get a Toon Break DPS that is able to take advantage of her better, oh, I wonder what is going to happen. And Mornier, while she isn't out yet, and we still have to wait for her official release, she is shaping up to be quite the strong unit. So once again, I wonder, when you consider all of that, when you take all of that into account, something tells me that Aemeath is going to be a very broken unit. So, what does this mean? I think it means a couple of things. First of all, I could be speaking complete nonsense right now. She might not be a Sentinel Resonator, and it could just be that she is of lower importance and we get a Sentinel Resonator later on. And I understand that Sentinel Resonator is an awkward thing to say here because there's just no Sentinel in Lahai Roi. So do take this with somewhat of a grain of salt. I do understand that it's a bit awkward to call her this. I'm just saying this because I believe that she is of that level of importance in the lore, and that is why Kuro is giving her so much attention. Also the whole Nanami XP thing. So I could be saying nonsense, but if I am on the right track, and if I am somewhat correct here, then I do believe that she will at least be the new strongest DPS in the game. Now, I don't know if it's going to apply in TOA or Whimpering Wastes or where it's going to apply, because with Cardathea, she ended up being one of the best TOA DPSs, but in wuwa, she's not as good, because Forlova's just kind of that girl. To be honest, I don't really think anybody's ever going to beat Forlova in Whimpering Wastes. That's just kind of an impossibility at this point. But if we're just talking about damage, I know that Kuro probably wants to make this character sell like hotcakes, and they are definitely going to do everything in their power to make sure that this unit does exactly that. So I personally think she is definitely going to be a cut above the rest. I don't think she's going to absolutely power creep the entire game, because that's not really how Kuro handles things. She's definitely going to be strong, I feel, but she's not going to be so good that it makes the other units look obsolete in comparison. And even if she did, remember this is a game where you ideally want multiple teams built in order to tackle endgame content efficiently. But I do think Kuro will keep it somewhat balanced, because they're not going to make her like 40k DPS better than the last DPS. That's just not how they do it. But I do think that she is going to be strong. Now, whether she's going to be budget friendly is yet to be seen. I really hope this is not another Cardathea situation where, oh yeah, she's really strong, but only if you have this given 5-star. It'll be even worse if she requires both of the Toon Break characters, but first of all, we have to wait for Mornier to release to actually evaluate her strength correctly and see what her official kit actually ends up looking like, and then, when it comes to Aemeath herself, we obviously have to wait and see, because I could be talking complete bogus here, and she ends up being a pretty average DPS. Something tells me that's not going to be the case, though. Another thing that I should also mention is that Kuro Games usually only shows off animations early for characters that they consider to be a bigger deal than the rest. See, I thought that Aemeath might end up being Augusta levels of important. Augusta was important enough to have her animation shown off, but she isn't exactly a Sentinel Resonator. She's not really as important as somebody like Cardathea or Jinshi in terms of lore. She's important, definitely, but I wouldn't really refer to her as being as important as a Sentinel Resonator. I would say that she is a tier below. That's what I thought Aemeath was going to be, but I personally have no doubt in my mind now that there is definitely some sort of Nanami connection here. I am really hoping for that because I love PGR, so here's hoping, and I am also pretty convinced that if she's not a Sentinel Resonator, she is something adjacent to that, but we're gonna have to wait and see what the story says. Overall, I think the animations are sick, I think this character is sick, and yeah, I am pretty confident she's gonna be broken, but that is just my theory. Let me know what you think. Hopefully this video is able to tell you I personally think Aemeath might end up being a little bit broken. This has been Juice, signing out, and to be honest, I'd be surprised if she isn't broken when she uses the freaking Exostrider sword!